Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Planet Futbol. We're here to break down all the biggest and most important stories happening in the football world. Today we'll be speaking with Red Bull Salzburg coach Jesse Marsch, as well as the Independent's Miguel Delaney. I'm Grant Wall, and sitting across from me is my guy, Luis Miguel Delaney. You ready to get this thing going?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
Let's do it. Let's start here. Club football is back finally this weekend, my friend, and I have a Premier League question for you. Which English heavyweight are you more concerned about this weekend? Manchester United hosting Leicester or Chelsea playing at Wolves?
This might be the best question you've ever given me. This is a hard one. This is really difficult. Not just because obviously we're talking about two teams who are trying to make it in the Champions League for next year, not just because there's European continental competition for both Chelsea with the Champions League, Man United with the Europa League, but it's also because the way both these teams are going right now and how they're heading. Right? In terms of Chelsea, you have Frank Lampard, obviously a club legend, who's still trying to identify his team, identify himself as a manager with a team that really has had no transfers aside from Christian Pulisic and obviously the young and the youth talent in Mason Mount and Tammy Abraham. Then you got Man United, another club legend who has lost so many players, and I feel like if one or two get injured, they are really done. Then I'm looking at their schedule. They have Leicester, as you said, Manchester United. Chelsea has Wolves. After that, Man United has West Ham in the Premier League, not before Astana in the Europa League. Chelsea has Liverpool, but then after Man United's West Ham, it's Arsenal. Chelsea has Brighton. So these schedules are kind of even, right? The mountains and the sort of obstacles they have to climb at even. If you're talking about specifically this weekend, right now, I'm more worried about Man United because I think, like I said a few weeks ago, Leicester City is not to be fooled around. I think this is a team that knows who it is. They have no issues right now in terms of, obviously Harry Maguire was a loss, but they have plenty of talent, right? James Maddison being one of them, right? Jamie Vardy, of course, but this is a team under Brendan Rodgers that can cause some damage. It doesn't matter whether it's away or at home. I think Wolves is suffering a little bit of a sophomore slump, right? They're still trying to gain that first win. I mean, they are hosting Chelsea, so it will be interesting to see. Tammy Abraham is scoring goals, so in terms of goal scoring power, hopefully we'll see what happens. But if you're asking me about these two specific games for this weekend, I'm a little bit more worried about Man United. And also because I think that Frank Lampard has a longer leash to hold on to if things go wrong.
The Chelsea manager has a longer leash? Is that the first time that's ever been said?
Only because he's a club legend. I think Solskjaer coming in from last season probably has less of a time. But it's not to say, again, going back to the very first statement, this is a very good question because it's like this, I feel. Like the wheels can come off for each one very, very quickly.
Well, this is one of the rare Premier League weekends where you don't have a matchup of a Big Six team against another Big Six team at all weekend. And yet when you look at these two games, here you have two Big Six teams that I think are kind of struggling and really need to have good performances this weekend in tough circumstances. We've seen what Leicester can do, getting a point at Chelsea. I think this could be, I'm not expecting Leicester to make a championship run like they did a few years ago, but I think they could be a team to be an outside shot at a top 5, top 4, maybe even team. And this game at United would be huge for them if they could get a result or even a win. And I'm starting to hear, Harry Maguire getting some static from United fans for his performances so far. And I almost wonder if him playing against Leicester, his old team, how he's going to feel, how he's going to perform mostly. I actually think, though, that this weekend's going to be harder for Chelsea against Wolves, mainly because they're on the road, but also because just defensively, they haven't looked all there for 90 minutes yet this season, not even once, really. And I thought it was interesting that Christian Pulisic ended up going back early, didn't play in the second U.S. game because it was that important for him to get back to Chelsea and be ready for this game after the international window. We'll see if that helps him, getting back there early, because it certainly didn't help the United States for him to leave before the Uruguay game. But I think things could get pretty dreary pretty quickly if Chelsea continues to drop points. And so I think there's actually even more pressure on Frank Lampard and Chelsea this weekend.
One more point, they need the most points they can get before European competition really kicks in, because that's when the calendar and the schedule is really going to demand so much of them. Moving on, the international window is over, so I want to know, what are your thoughts on America's 3-0 loss to Mexico and the 1-1 draw against Uruguay?
So I was at the game against Mexico, 3-0 loss in the Meadowlands. Pretty poor overall, and I was a little surprised afterward how Greg Berhalter really tried to put a positive spin on things, saying this was a better performance than against Mexico in the Gold Cup final, which it wasn't, and also just kind of saying, look, you know, we're going to continue to try and play through pressure out of the back, even though that was something that every single person in the stadium could see wasn't going to work and was going to cause problems, which it did, especially in the second half. And I'm not one of these people who thinks you should value system over players. And I know Greg Berhalter is an ambitious coach, very tactically oriented. And yes, I sort of appreciate the ambition. I just don't think he has the players right now to play the way he wants to play. And I'm not sure that a mid-level national team like the United States is in a position to try and embrace a pretty complicated system when Berhalter doesn't get his players very often. Coaching a national team is very different from coaching a club team. And what we've seen from Greg Berhalter over the years has always been at club level, where he had more time and the ability to work not just with American players, but with really gifted players like Federico Higuain and other non-Americans. So I am concerned about the U.S. and about whether Berhalter is going to be able to instill what he wants to do in time. I think it would have helped if U.S. Soccer had actually hired him many months earlier than they did, because they had that time to work with and they flat out squandered it. And I think that's something that every U.S. fan should be really upset about. Now, the performance against Uruguay, it just seemed at a much slower pace, both teams in this game, and there wasn't a heck of a lot to take out of it. My big takeaway was Brian Rodriguez is going to be fun to watch with LAFC. Scored a goal for Uruguay. Jordan Morris, I thought, played okay. You know, stood out a little bit. Not so much for the goal, that, you know, right place, right time, but I thought he created some danger. So it's good to see Jordan Morris maybe playing a bit better, but, you know, I don't come away from these games thinking that the U.S. is some world-beating team, because they're just not.
You know, some really good points. I'll go back to the whole tactics and what Berhalter is trying to do in terms of playing it from the back with pressure. Listen, I'll give you a little anecdote. When I was teaching high school, okay, my first year, we had a tremendous squad. And my whole philosophy was a certain way. Play it from the back, 3 triangle in the middle, let's go wide, let's attack. We won states the first year. Second year, I was arrogant enough to think that I can do that with a same type of team. And so I thought the same the next year after that. Guess what? Not even close. I had negative records in both. So listen, I'm not saying I'm a professional manager or anything like that, but what I learned was that sometimes, even as good as you can be when it comes to your tactics and the way that you think a team should play, you have to know what players you have. You have to know the roster that you have. And at this point, the U.S. men's national team is not a team that should play from the back. Let me tell you something. Manchester City with Pep Guardiola, and even Barcelona, even with Ernesto Valverde and other teams, right? They love their possession-based soccer, but they have a plan B and they have a plan C. And when you have a Mexican team under Tata Martino who loves to press, sometimes, just sometimes, you need to be more long ball direct. I understand the thinking that Berhalter wants to keep building upon the possession game, and he is a fine manager. But I really am a believer that you need your plan A, your plan B, your plan C, because at the end of the day, these players are not going to follow your philosophy and your tactics for 90 minutes. And it's going to get interesting and tough. So I'm a little bit worried, and I'm with you. Like, I don't take too much away from friendlies, but at the same time, at this point, I mean, you know, CONCACAF is one thing, but the U.S. has a lot to do in order to improve.
I also think the identity of the American player is such in the year 2019 that if you're going to bring in a superstar coach, I'd rather have Diego Simeone come in and coach the U.S. than I would Pep Guardiola. Because
Correct.
That is a better fit for the American player.
Which is why I wanted Tata for the U.S. in the first place.
Yep. Moving on. I want to hear your take on Mexico, my friend. Tata Martino's team trounced the U.S. 3-0. But that 4-0 loss by Mexico to Argentina was ugly, ugly, ugly. Where do you see Mexico right now?
Yeah, let's focus more on that Argentina game, because that, to me, actually, after a few days of figuring it out, to me, it's a bit of an anomaly, actually. I don't think it's Mexican fans, although they will, should freak out over this result. There are many worrying signs, though. I mean, this was an Argentina B team. It wasn't the top first team with all their players. But if you look carefully and dissect this game, every Lautaro Martinez goal was actually a result of the same mistake. Exactly the same mistake, which is actually Tata Martino's Achilles heel. They press so much that when they have to come back in defensive transition, the moment they make a mistake at the back, specifically their back four or their two center backs, quickly the opposition can take over and it's over. And they were both exactly similar games, but it was a disastrous match. And Tata acknowledged it at the end. But if you're asking me, you know, is this something that's going to happen over and over again? No, I don't think so. I think that this is something that Tata has to work with his team, and they're learning. You know, friendlies are there to learn. The difference between what I'm seeing from Tata and Mexico and losing to Argentina 4-0 and the US losing 3-0 to Mexico is that at least Tata, I think, will be able to be flexible in terms of his thinking and understand what's going to happen when I play a certain team. I don't think it's going to happen. I mean, of course they're going to lose again, but to see the same mistake being done over and over again in the course of 90 minutes, is that something to be expected for? And let's look at expectations. They both need to qualify for the World Cup. That's the overall goal, right? But for the US, I think that it's not enough. I think you need to win CONCACAF to really win over the Windsor Berhalter. I think if Tata and Mexico qualify for the World Cup and they come second, yes, people will be annoyed, but their overall thing is to the quinto partido. That's really what they want. So, you know, it's a process. I think the loss, the 4-0 against Argentina was really bad, but I think they're going to learn from it.
I do wonder if in some ways that's going to be his version of Osorio's 7-0 loss to Chile. Now, granted, that was in a competitive tournament, the Copa America Centenario, but this was just a friendly. But this was 4-0 in the first half against Argentina's B team in a friendly. And if that is his version of that Osorio game, then I think he'll come back just fine from it. I'd much rather be in Mexico's shoes right now than the United States, and I think Tata Martino is equipped to lead Mexico to a World Cup quarterfinal. I think he's got the talent. I think he's got the tactics. He's got the resume and the experience, and I still can't believe the U.S. didn't interview him.
Absolutely. We're going to keep banging that drum. MLS is in the stretch run of its regular season, and suddenly there are concerns that the star-filled LA Galaxy could miss the playoffs for the third straight season. They're currently 1 point out of the playoff picture. Grant, what's wrong with LA, and do you think that the Galaxy will make it to the playoffs?
You know, I think when you look at their schedule, the remainder of the regular season, they're going to sneak in. I don't know if they deserve to. They've been a pretty mediocre team at best for a while now. And I know Zlatan Ibrahimovic has decent stats when you look at his goal production for the year, but the guy never defends. And I think that's an issue, even if you're Zlatan. And I think the team around him just isn't that good. And they really need to put it together now down the stretch. Here's an interesting story. So we were considering doing a magazine piece on LA and MLS and doing LAFC and the Galaxy and focusing on Ibrahimovic. Ibrahimovic said in very Zlatan fashion that he didn't want to share an article with LAFC, so we're not doing the story now, which is unfortunate. But this was supposed to be leading into the playoffs, and now I'm actually kind of glad it didn't work out because LA Galaxy may not make the playoffs, and this is a team that missed out in horrible fashion in the final game of the regular season last year. And for them to be in this position again is frankly stunning. And I put a lot of that on the Galaxy not putting a team around Zlatan to be a team that was obviously going to make the playoffs. But that's not a complete team by any stretch of the imagination right now.
Yeah, listen, our head editor, Avi Creditor, wrote a really good piece about this today as we speak, actually. But let's look at the facts here. They have a negative goal differential, right? They've conceded 47 goals. It's not the worst in the Western Conference, but it's bad, right? They 19 non-Zlatan goals through 29 games.
Not good enough.
It's not good enough, right? 4 out of the 5 matches are with teams that are not in the playoffs, so I'm with you. I don't think it's going to be a situation. 7 get in the playoffs, right? Like, it's harder to...
Which is ridiculous.
It's harder to not make it than to make it. So all the things in terms of like what's going to happen in the postseason point to the direction that they should make it. But that still doesn't alleviate or leave the fact that there is an Ibrahimovic dependence. And GBS coming in, right, should have fixed a lot of the issues. They have Pavon from Boca Juniors on loan, right? They have a tremendous amount of midfielders, and for some reason, that midfield is just like opening gaps. They're not good in terms of defending set pieces. There's a lot of issues. And like you said, this really shouldn't be happening to LA Galaxy. I think that they'll make the playoffs, but the problems remain. There's way more needed than just Ibrahimovic, because you can score 5, but you'll always concede 6. So
I think it's important to note that just even if they make the playoffs, that should not be considered a success. 7 teams in each conference make the playoffs, so don't act like that's the dividing line, the threshold on successful or not.
They should be competing LAFC for the Western Conference.
They do fine head-to-head.
Right, so do it with everybody else.
Next up, the last time any of us saw Lionel Messi play a competitive game was on July 6th in the Copa America third-place game. More than 2 months have passed, and we're hearing that his calf injury will likely prevent him from playing this weekend in Spain, and maybe even in Champions League next week against Dortmund. How concerned are you about Lionel Messi right now?
Yeah, you know what? I am. It's an ongoing. It's past the recovery time now, right? And I think obviously it says a lot about the fact that, sadly, yes, we all have to admit it, Messi's getting older, right? So his body may not be healing as fast as it probably did when he was 24 or 25. But Barcelona has only won 1 of the last 8 matches without Messi. Obviously, they have talent, right? But Luis Suarez is obviously still injured. But, Griezmann coming in helps. But, now we're beginning to see a Barcelona. This is what you're going to have to get used to from now on. A Messi that may not be fit for you for that long period of time. And it's a reality that we have to deal with. I'm worried in terms of, how well they're going to do in terms of Champions League and La Liga, because remember, I said that Atletico Madrid is going to win this season, not Barcelona, but a healthy Messi is what the world wants to see. It's a little worrying that it's gone past it's an ongoing issue, but it's just something that we have to deal with. This is an aging Lionel Messi, and it's just a reality.
I'm just bummed out as someone who really treasures Messi and wants to see him play as much as possible. And understanding the situation here, I was all excited because they had an exclusive interview coming out this week in, I think it was Diario Sport over there. And I looked through all the quotes and I was like, these aren't very interesting. It's just like Messi being Messi, I guess. The one thing he did say was that he was willing to accept a dinner invitation with Cristiano Ronaldo.
There you go. Let's see what happens.
Let's see if they can get that on Amazon.
Let's see who pays the check. I'll see that one.
Yeah, exactly.
The UEFA Champions League group stage begins on Tuesday. Grant, what game are you most excited to see?
I'm most excited to see PSG hosting Real Madrid, in part because Neymar is finally back for PSG after all the stuff that was happening. We thought he was going to leave, and then he wasn't. Now, he has a home league game before that this weekend, and we're going to see if the PSG fans are changing their tune at all, because they were very vocal already this season in the stands in their negativity toward Neymar. And I think a lot of them assumed he wasn't going to be a PSG player again. Well, he's back. And so now we'll have to wait and see how that relationship goes. And this first game in Champions League is the 2 heavyweights in this group. I expect both of them will go through. But if you're PSG and you lose at home in this first Champions League group game, that's not good. And Real Madrid's got their own issues, right? Eden Hazard sounds like he's finally healthy enough to play, so I'm very curious to see how he plays for them. But it's not like they've been lighting things up in La Liga so far. And so Zidane has to figure out some things. And how much do I want to use these guys that I've said that I don't really want even on the team, like a Gareth Bale, but he's actually playing pretty well for him among other players. So I think there's a lot to see in this game. And And I'm looking forward to having Champions League back.
Absolutely. Two imperfect superstar teams going on at each other. I'll give you the other one, which is the two heavyweights, Napoli against Liverpool. Obviously the two favorites in this group. There's a lot to me in terms of goals here, right? Because Napoli has been involved already in two 4-3 matches, one where they won, one where they didn't win. And Liverpool, in a perfect record right now in the Premier League, has scored at least 2 goals in each one. Only one game where they haven't scored 3 goals. So to me, I'm hoping, because of the systems, Ancelotti's, fast-paced, high-press system, and obviously we know about Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool, this is going to be a game where we're going to see a lot of goals. Insigne is not necessarily, we don't know if he's going to be fit, so maybe we're going to see a little bit more of Chucky Lozano in this one. Llorente is obviously there, but to me, this is about two attacking heavyweights that are going off at each other. Side note, obviously, Ancelotti is very mad at his stadium right now because they've had to play away from home because their own dressing room is not ready, and they don't even know if it's going to be ready for this Champions League. I mean, this is Serie A, people. Get your stadium ready.
Unbelievable. You talk about those 2 4-3 games that Napoli's already been involved in, and their central defenders, Koulibaly and Manolas, I thought would be better than they have been so far.
Yeah.
And maybe these have been some outlier situations, but they've got to get things tighter in the back if they're going to advance too far in Champions League.
And now comes Salah. Let's see what happens.
Exactly. Joining us now is American Jesse Marsch, the first-year head coach at Red Bull Salzburg, whose team is perfect after 6 games in the Austrian League and has its first UEFA Champions League game of the season this Tuesday against Belgium's Genk. Other teams in the group include Liverpool and Napoli. Jesse, thanks for coming back on the show.
Yeah, Grant, thanks for having me. It's always good to talk to you, buddy.
Well, let's start with the Champions League. This is your first season as a head coach in Europe. Drawing Liverpool and Napoli means you get to look across the touchline in Champions League games at Anfield and the San Paulo and see Jurgen Klopp and Carlo Ancelotti. What goes through your mind when you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's a big task for us and 2 massive opponents and 2 well-coached teams. And that's really what goes through my mind is how good can our team be against some of the best in the world. And on the day, just making sure that we do everything we can to give our guys the best chance to be successful. So, of course, yeah, coaching against the best coaches in the world with incredible success and history is always an honor and interesting, but what's most important is the performance of our team.
Jesse, great to have you. Luis here, staying with the Champions League. This is also the club's first season in the tournament, so it's a big moment. How do you plan to approach the games, specifically as they're sandwiched in between domestic competition?
Yeah, well, that's one of the big challenges is, when you're in Europe as well as your domestic league, and we have a cup mixed in a cup match against Rapid mixed in this month as well. You have to have a big cadre or a big squad. Sorry, that's German. You have to have a big squad and you have to rely on your squad. So in the past 2 months, we focused a lot on rotating our lineup a little bit and getting a lot of different guys' experiences. We believe in the depth of our squad, and we believe that we have a really good young team, and we're going to need that. We're going to need that in the next month, in the next 2 months, in the next 3 months. And I think that this group right now is prepared for that. We're young, we're dynamic, we're explosive, and we're aggressive. And I think that's what you're going to see from us in every game that we play. That's what it's been like so far. And certainly when we go into Champions League, the one thing we want to do more than anything else is to go for it. We're not going to hold anything back. We're going to make sure that we're aggressive, and we're going to try to play our way.
Jesse, you have a 6'4", 19-year-old Norwegian forward with your team, ERLING BRAUT HALAND, who has scored 8 goals in 6 league games this season. What can you tell us about him, and do you think he can make an impact in the Champions League?
Yeah, Erling's special. He's a special talent, a special guy. At 19 years old, he's an incredible professional. So I left our training facility tonight at 6 p.m., and he was, when we had training at 10 today, he was still there in the cold pool, doing everything he can to make sure that physically he's prepared. And that's what I think makes young players, the best young players, special, is their mentality, their attention to detail, their desire to be the best. You know, I saw it every day with Tyler Adams, and now that's the case with Erling. And I think the sky's the limit for this kid. We've seen him get better and better. I think, you know, he's on the radar of so many big clubs in Europe already right now. But here and now, he's with us, and I think he's ready to make a big impact in Champions League.
Jesse, staying with this theme of young players and a young squad, you also have, you know, players like Dominik Szoboszlai, only 18 years old, coming off scoring a fantastic goal for Hungary. Max Wober's 21. The aforementioned Haaland is 19. Look, as Ajax proved it, right? Age doesn't determine how well you do in a tournament, specifically when you think of a team as they enter the biggest club tournament in the world. But how do you see it? How do you make this happen when you have such a young team?
Well, I think no matter what your group is, you have to play to your strengths. You know, if we wanted to talk about, well, this team doesn't have the most experience or they haven't played in as many big games, then you could think about, yeah, possibly all the reasons why it would be difficult for this group. But when you look at how athletic we are, how talented we are, how fearless we are, how aggressive we are, we have to play to who we are and to what our best qualities are. And that's one of the great things about coaching young players is they have this mentality like they're going to be there every year. I swear, guys like Schobo and Erling and Max Wuber, they all think that they're going to play in Champions League every year and that this is right where they belong and this is right where they're going to be. And so we're going to use that, right? We're going to make sure that when we go on the pitch in Liverpool and Anfield, or whether it's Tuesday at home against Genk, that we go on the field and that we play aggressive, that we play with confidence. And again, that's a lot of fun for a trainer, man, to just let the group, to give them the tools to be successful and then to let them go and play. And that's certainly what's gotten us to be a good team so far this year.
Jesse, when I came to visit you at RB Leipzig last spring, you talked about how regimented things were in Germany. What have you learned so far about how things operate in Austria?
Well, I think I underestimated a lot coming to Europe what the social experience was going to be like and the cultural experience. And, you know, I learned a lot about Germany in terms of how Leipzig's different than Munich, how East Germany's different than West Germany, how Germany's different than the US and mentality. I learned a lot of amazing things about structure and how to think about football in the last 4 years from everyone in Germany or in the Red Bull system. And I think what the balance of life here in Austria is people are very focused on life balance and on how they treat each other and what the daily experience is, not just professionally or with football, but overall what's the quality of life. So I think that for me and my family, it's been a really fun and positive experience. You know, and yet at a place like Salzburg, there's so much competitive drive. And they've had so much success here over the last 10, 15 years. They've had so much success in Europa League. And there's so much ambition right now in the club and motivation to do well in this moment in Champions League. So we're excited about the opportunity. And again, we're going to go for it.
Jesse, you know MLS, you're gaining more and more experience in Europe. As you said, you're about to become the first ever American manager in the Champions League. What are your thoughts on American players and where they should be in order to fully maximize their potential? Grow and develop domestically, play abroad early. What do you think? What is the makeup of the American player and how they are evolving, and where should they be in order to get the best out of them?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. You know, the concept of youth development, I think, focuses way more on football than it does on personal experiences. And that's where I think, for me, the answer lies, is that each individual is a little bit different. And understanding maturity levels, understanding what challenges are necessary for the next steps for progress in a person's life, that then I think leads to a player's career. You know, I remember having so many conversations with Matt Miazga about what was the proper development path for him. And he was anxious to get over to Europe quickly, but maybe it was too quick, you know, and maybe it was too early. And now the road has taken a lot of little twists and turns that maybe haven't always helped him the most. And Tyler, I think, was somebody who who was a little bit more patient, that understood, you know, being in a safer environment for a certain amount of time in MLS and at New York was a good thing. I think he grew rapidly in the environment that he was in, and I think it also created a really good foundation for him to go on and have bigger and greater successes, whether at RB Leipzig or beyond. And so I think that's what's important. You know, I mean, listen, I stayed in MLS for 14 years. I wasn't a top talent, but I felt like I developed every year. I got a lot better. I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about life. I learned a lot about football. And so I think for each person and player, it's a little bit different. And to find the right environment is the most important thing. And even now, when I look at Christian Pulisic, I really hope that Chelsea winds up being the right spot for him. It was so fun to watch him at Dortmund and how well he was doing there. And I think, you know, the name Chelsea and the league, the Premier League and everything, it's such a, it makes such a, I think, a massive imprint on everybody. But, you know, I really hope that he can establish himself in the level that he needs to continue to grow and be the player that we all know he can be.
Well, Jesse Marsch, you are breaking new ground, my friend, for American coaches in Europe. Thanks for joining us. Good luck in Champions League.
Thanks, buddy. Good to talk to you guys, and talk to you soon.
For this week's social media check-in, we're catching up on my favorite Messi, Mateo Messi, Lionel Messi's middle son, and what he's been up to. It's always fun when some cameras catch Mateo doing anything. And being that it was his birthday this week, there was plenty of Mateo antics to laugh at. Let's take a look. This was Mateo's birthday, and he decided to celebrate just like his father via Antonella Rocuso's Instagram. He's just like, honestly, Grant, he's just the funniest, craziest kid in the world. I don't know if he's going to be a professional, but he is just the greatest. Do we have the last one? The last one is absolutely my favorite. Here he is. He's like watching his dad in Copa America. This guy's telling him, look, you got to be quiet. Get away from me. Cállate. Slapping him right in the face. This kid is amazing, Grant. I love Mateo Messi. Give me Mateo Messi content any day.
I think we're going to see lots more of it over the years. And I mean, he's very different from his dad,
Yeah.
It seems like. And he's getting a personality, and that personality is very outgoing.
He's going to burn Camp Nou down one day.
Now it is time for our Games of the Week. Luis Miguel, what is yours?
My game of the week is Gimnasia versus Racing Club. This match in the Argentinian Primera División is Diego Maradona's return to coaching, and fans are extremely excited about it. And that was obviously Gimnasia fans celebrating Maradona's return to Argentinian football as the fans welcomed him in the stadium. Here's what you should try and watch. This game obviously is about Maradona, and it's about him returning as a coach to Argentinian soccer. Gimnasia obviously not doing very well, bottom of the league. They're at home. I mean, regardless of what happens, I want to see two things. I want to see the fans going crazy. I bet you we're going to see a red card. It's probably going to include Diego Maradona, but it should be a good one to watch.
I think also, too, and you and I both interviewed Steve Capadia, the director of this new Maradona documentary film, which comes out on HBO October 1st. It's fantastic. And so I'm very much in the Maradona mood these days. And so I'm curious to see if he can be actually an effective coach and not just a sideshow, because you know you're going to get the show. And he was actually, it looked like, pretty overcome with emotion when he was shown to the fans down there at Gimnasia. And so I'd like to see him have some success and not just be somebody that is kind of a train wreck.
Yeah, we always have a romantic relationship with Maradona. Let's see what happens.
My game of the week is in the Bundesliga, where RB Leipzig and Bayern Munich will be facing off. You can watch that one on TUDN and FS2 this Saturday at 12:30 p.m. Eastern. Here's why I think you should tune in. This game could help decide the Bundesliga. I know it's very early in the season. They'll meet each other again later on, and there may even be other teams like Dortmund who have something to say about the Bundesliga title. But I think Leipzig is good enough to win the Bundesliga. They're going to be a team, I think it's going to have an impact in Champions League as well. Timo Werner off to a very good start to the season after we learned he was going to stay with Leipzig. And just across the line there, Yusuf Poulsen is a fantastic player who I think could really have a breakout year. And all up and down that lineup. You know, I spent time around them when we visited Jesse Marsch and Tyler Adams in the spring. And, you know, we even spent time inside sort of their cafeteria with them. And this is a team that seems to like each other, to have like a really good internal relationship. They play good soccer. This would be a real good opportunity for them to make a statement in the Bundesliga title race.
No, I'm with you. This is a great game to watch. And RB Leipzig, like you said, plays some great stuff. One thing that's particularly interesting is I want to see how Bayern Munich deal, because what happens is when both these teams play, is you get a lot of pressure in the midfield from RB Leipzig, really trying to suffocate and not allow them to, you know, feed the ball to Lewandowski. So I want to see what Coutinho and how he handles this. Obviously, he's a talented player. He's seen it all, but this is probably a new kind of competition, new kind of force for him to see what he can do.
It's not too often that I say that the game of the week around the world, at least for us, is not in the Premier League. That's definitely the case this week.
Definitely.
Joining us now is Miguel Delaney, the chief football writer for the Independent in England. Miguel, thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Lots to talk about, my friend. You wrote a really interesting story recently looking at Manchester United's inability to hire a technical director yet and comparing the situation at United to the one right now at Man City. What, in your mind, is the biggest issue at Manchester United right now?
As we know, there are many issues, but I think they all stem from the one fundamental, which is I think that ultimately United don't really know what they want to be as a football club. I mean, in that piece, the reason I picked Man City, I suppose, is because ultimately they've become a case that they display best practice in football. And what they did, I mean, because of their takeover, they're the wealthiest club in football, but they've used their money more intelligently than anyone. And they've done that through the most intelligent hires, and essentially very quickly defining a philosophy of the club that they want to build everything from. And I mean, if you even think of that in basic terms, like would say recruitment in terms of putting the team together. City, when they look at a player, I mean, I was talking to one of the scouts that's worked at the club, one of the agents worked with them, and I said, like, the key with City is when they look at a player, within 5 minutes, because their style of football is so defined, they can judge whether a player fits the approach. And that minimizes risks, basically minimizes errors in the transfer market and maximizes the potential of their football. And at Manchester United, they just don't have that idea. And I suppose worse at the moment, they don't have any sort of figure who would articulate that idea. Really, that should be the job of a director of football, especially in the modern game. I mean, Solskjaer has talked about kind of principles he wants to play with, and principles are well and good, but they're still not a core idea. Like, I mean, he's talked about playing fast pressing football. He's talked about bringing youth through, and they're kind of end products rather than a central philosophy.
Miguel, from problems at the top down lower, you also wrote a great piece on the financial disparity between the Premier League and lower divisions. The tragic stories of Bury and Bolton Wanderers are only just two examples, but it's really more than just financial differences that are creating a huge gap between the top flight and what's below. What's going on in English football, and what can be done in order to save certain lower division clubs?
Well, it feels like a number of kind of historical and current factors have come together to really, and I don't like saying this, but I think it's on the brink of the truth, to ensure that the English football pyramid, which is unique really, is breaking apart. I think it's unsustainable. I mean, one of the pieces I did in May, I was talking to someone who's worked with clubs at a government level, and it was because basically of the place of clubs in society, their importance to social institutions, and it's one of the few kind of community hubs left in a lot of towns. And one of the estimates from the government approach was basically that at least 75% of clubs in League One, League Two will have to at least change their form of business within the next 4 years, because really they can't sustain this current model. They're not getting enough money in. They're not getting enough fans in. And I suppose part of that is really because the Premier League is it's this satellite. It's satellite that's kind of a level beyond the rest of the game in that sense. It's still connected to it though, even though it's basically a global sport with then sort of this parochial structure underneath. And one of the most immediate problems is that creates this huge financial drag all the way down where everyone tries to keep up to the next level, which then creates these massive kind of tank traps in between that so many clubs are falling into.
Miguel, another story you wrote recently was on Neymar and how he has sort of lost his way. How would you describe the situation surrounding Neymar as he goes forward with PSG after not moving during the transfer window?
Well, to be fair to him, one of the more promising things I heard late in the window was, and this was even before the Barcelona transfer broke down, and I to give them credit, I don't think this is purely calculated or predicated an idea that it might break down. They made it known to PSG that if it didn't happen, he was willing to knuckle down. Because, I mean, ultimately that's been one of the issues of the past 2 years, that PSG have felt he often hasn't been fully invested. Talking to someone close to him, there's a feeling that sometimes if he can do what he likes, he doesn't train as hard as he should, doesn't work as hard as he should. But now it feels that I think when Neymar himself has realised that he's at a bit of a crossroads in his career, he should be one of the 3 best players in the world. And now, I mean, his aim when going to PSG was to overtake both Messi and Ronaldo and be the best. And now there's a fair argument whether on performance, not in terms of not on talent, whether he's even in the top 10 of the world right now. I mean, his teammate Mbappe seems to get over. But it does feel like there's a realization on his part and within his wider entourage, and it's quite a big entourage that has caused problems at times. But there is realization it's time to make good and all that talent. And I suppose the hope is we see the Neymar we should this season.
Let's talk about PSG as a whole, Miguel. We can pretty much guess how Ligue 1 is going to go for them, but do you think PSG has any chance of reaching the Champions League final this time around?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I'd say, I think we're at the point with the Champions League where there's about 6 to 8 clubs that are of such wealth and such size that if they get to the knockout stage, which they will, they're in with a chance because it is just a knockout in that way. But I suppose with PSG, they have all those advantages, but they also have specific, almost psychological hurdles to overcome at this point because of the way they've gone out in the last few seasons. Well, 2017, obviously, the most famous, that remarkable collapse of Barcelona. 2018 was bad in its own way because that was the first Champions League season after they bought Mbappe and Neymar and ostensibly changed the game. Then they went out rather tepidly to Real Madrid. Then last season against a really under fire Manchester United, they blew a 2-goal lead and then went out again. So the quality is there, the will is there, and it's about bringing all that together. I do think they can win it. I still, if I was gambling, I don't think I'd bet on them.
Let's talk about some more action in the Champions League. Some intriguing storylines to kick off the first set of matches. Napoli against Liverpool. As we talked, PSG, they're playing on Real Madrid. Atletico against Juventus. Is there a game that you're looking forward to seeing? What stands out to you?
I'm at both of those first games you mentioned. Thankfully, one of the perks of the job. So yeah, Napoli, Liverpool, and PSG, Madrid. And it's probably PSG Madrid, I suppose, because there's so many, I mean, beyond the quality of the football offer, and I haven't seen Madrid in the flesh yet this season, so I really want to see what they're kind of like, given there are a lot of doubts in Spain about their signings. But then, of course, there's all the undercurrents to this game as well, in terms of that Madrid obviously want to take one of Neymar, but above all, Mbappe of PSG eventually. And yet there's an interesting relationship between the clubs because Florentino Perez has always been quite respectful and standoffish with PSG. I think because there's a certain amount of fear there, because they've seen what PSG have done to Barcelona in 2017 with Neymar. So this feeds into all. I think the two clubs do have a good relationship because Perez realised that. But that, I think that creates a really interesting context to this game.
Miguel, the first time I remember encountering your work was back around 2011 when you had a website called Football Pantheon. Can you give our viewers a sense of what that was and still is? It's still on the internet.
Yeah, it hasn't been updated it hasn't been updated since 2012, I think, unfortunately. It was basically when obviously, as you can hear from the accent, I'm Irish. It it was when a newspaper I worked for in Ireland went bust, and at the time when we were kind of, I suppose, on garden leave, awaiting redundancy, and before I moved to London, I was, it was a little project I always kind of wanted to do, which is essentially ranking the great teams and great players, and particularly more, I think more so the teams, were trying to come up with a little kind of fun formula to actually add a bit of measurement to who was the best, and also because I'm really. It's one of the things I actually want to eventually do a book on, but I'm really interested in the history of the European Cup and Champions League in that way. So yeah, it was an attempt to kind of, I think the tagline I had for it at the time was separating the history from the hysteria. I don't think at the time actually Barcelona 2011 came out on SAHAR. So I split it into 2 eras, like so teams that are kind of 3-year cycles based on certain factors. And with Barca, it was that 2008-11 team. I think now I'd have them on top, to be honest. And it's funny enough, actually, I interviewed Pedro today for an interview in the Independent next week, and we were discussing precisely this, whether that team stands above, and personally, that I think they would.
Nice. Well, people who are watching this can go to Football Pantheon. I went back there last week as I was preparing for this, and I remember when I first saw it, I was like, this guy's interesting. I think he might go places. So,
and there you go.
Now you're on our show. What happened to you? Miguel Delaney, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Cheers. Thanks, guys. Thank you.
And now our parting shots. Barclays FA Women's Super League, now with 12 teams, kicked off in England last week, and it was a great success as crowds showed up in record numbers, including derby matches at the Etihad between Man City and United, and down south at Stamford Bridge when Chelsea hosted Tottenham. In total, 63,000 people turned up across the country on opening weekend, a huge boost from last 2 years where the league average was less than 900. Obviously, this comes in part thanks to the success of this past summer's World Cup in Paris, where the infrastructure and development interest has been not just in England, but across the world. But my parting shot today is not about the need to grow the women's game, we know that. But just really to kind of promote what the WSL is doing this season with the digital efforts. Last week, sitting in the office from New York City, I was able to watch any game for free through their great app, FAPlayer.tv, including great footage and commentary. And what's even more, the following day I watched Aston Villa women in the championship with the same kind of quality. It's a great product and it's all for free. So I really want to salute the league for a tremendous effort. As Grant said last week with FIFA, YouTube and streaming African World Cup qualifiers, it's important that fans have access from a global perspective. The need to strengthen digital and social media channels in order to watch these games is crucial, especially in times when more and more people are becoming cord cutters and relying more on what's on their phone and laptops. And for the women's game, this is even more important. Now that the interest in attendance is alive and well and the digital outreach has a fine product, let's keep riding that wave.
Yeah, good stuff. I mean, what's happening right now with women's soccer in Europe and especially in the UK and in England is impressive, I think. And you're starting to feel like they're getting it, like the people who promote it, who are building it. I'm curious to see if they're actually going to get to a point where they have a Premier League for the women's game over there, and it's not run by the FA, because that would be a sign of even greater growth.
Right, but just for what it is right now, specifically digitally, I am very, very impressed.
This week, I want to talk about a woman from Iran named SAHAR KHODAYARI. Iran is a country that's crazy about soccer, but since the Islamic Revolution in 1979, women have not been allowed to attend soccer matches in the country. A fan of the club Istiklal, SAHAR snuck into one of her club's games in March at the giant Azadi Stadium in Tehran. She got caught, was arrested, and recently was sentenced to 6 months in prison. On September 2nd, after being sentenced, SAHAR KHODAYARI set fire to herself outside a courthouse in Iran. She suffered severe burns over 90% of her body, and this week, SAHAR died from those burns. She was 29. SAHAR's favorite club team wears blue, and so she has been memorialized on social media with the hashtag #BlueGirl. FIFA issued a statement of deep regret for SAHAR's passing, And it's true that FIFA has tried to pressure Iranian authorities recently to try and rescind their ban on women attending games ahead of the nation's first qualifier for World Cup 2022 on October 10th. But Maryam Shojaei, the sister of Iranian men's national team captain Masoud Shojaei, told the New York Times that FIFA was to blame for allowing Iran to escape sanctions despite years of lobbying by her and a group called Open Stadiums, which you can find on Twitter at Open Stadiums. FIFA has rules that ban member nations from discriminating on the basis of gender or race, but hasn't done nearly enough to enforce those rules with Iran. Tragically, it's too late to save the life of SAHAR KHODAYARI, who was just a fan who wanted to see her team play a soccer game. But it's not too late for FIFA to say unequivocally to Iran, you will be banned from any qualification for World Cup 2022 in Qatar and any further benefits FIFA could give you if you do not do what's right and by October 1st remove every single barrier to women attending games. News reports now say that FIFA is planning to dispatch a delegation to Iran and that the Iranian government is indicating it will accept allowing women into stadiums. But they have given that indication before and not followed through. FIFA needs to make sure that change finally happens. SAHAR KHODAYARI has died. It's time, at long last, for authorities to do the right thing.
Well said, my friend, and this is just a tragedy. It's a tragedy, and I agree. I think that although FIFA has created a certain level of aptitude to try and stop things like this happening, it hasn't done nowhere near enough when it comes to Iran and the situation there. Like you said, somebody has died as a result of this, and if we're going to call this the world's game, the beautiful game, then it's time to really rethink what we mean by that, specifically when it comes to these sanctions and these bans from the Iranian government and the Iranian Federation, to be honest.
Yeah, it's about time. Too many years have passed, too many awful things have happened. Now we have a woman who's died, which is just awful. That is it for this week's episode of Planet Futbol. Thanks for joining us, and catch us next week and every week after that on Thursdays on SITV, YouTube, or SI.com.